Okay, go for it, Anna.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar about how and why classic film can inspire audiences back to your cinema or indeed festival. I'm your host, Anna Smith. I'm a film critic and host of the Girls on Film podcast. Thank you and welcome to today's webinar about how and why classic film can inspire audiences back to your cinema or indeed festival. I'm your host, Anna Smith, Girls on Film podcast. Thank you and welcome to today's webinar about how and why classic film can inspire audiences. Hello and welcome to today's webinar about how and why classic film can inspire audiences back to your cinema or indeed festival. I'm Anna Smith, I'm film critic, host of the Girls on Film podcast and your host today. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us from far and wide. We should be around an hour today. So we know things remain challenging for many folks across the exhibition and festival sector, but good news, we are seeing brighter days dawning. Today, we want to provide some inspiration for those of you planning your reopening by talking about how and why rep film can be such a great way to welcome your audiences back, and we know they're keen. We'll also be talking about how rep film is covered in the media and how it's perceived by audiences as a result. After all, we all need to create a cultural appetite for the return to cinemas. I'll be chatting to Adam Woodward, digital editor of Little White Lies, who's here with me now, and they champion great movies and the talented people who make them. Now, if you joined us for our last two webinars, where we explained how rep films can enhance your cinema programme, then you'll know about Park Circus and their role in bringing classic film back to the big screen. So my guest a little later will be from Park Circus. We'll have Jack Bell, Director of Theatrical Sales, and Kate Timperley, Marketing and Communications Director. So Jack and Kate will be explaining how they can help you plan for your reopening. The last few minutes we'll be having a Q&A, so feel free to ask questions all the way through and we'll respond in the last 10 minutes or so today. We'll be sharing a recording afterwards and we're live on YouTube today as well. But before we start, I just want to pass over to Mark Hertzberger-Taylor, the CEO of Park Circus, for a brief welcome. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Anna, many thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to jump in here and extend a very warm welcome on behalf of all of us at Park Circus. I'm very pleased that this is already our third webinar. I think we've come a long way since then. A big thanks to Adam for joining us, and of course my own Kate and Jack later. I'll be watching. It's very, we're very encouraged about the feedback on this and the number of attendees. So we do want this to become a regular event even after the pandemic finally finishes. And on that note, it is very encouraging to see that after such a long time, that light at the famous light at the end of the tunnel does seem to be getting brighter. And I just want to stress and please be rest assured that all of us at Park Circus are here to accompany you on that final stretch and beyond. So enjoy this afternoon and please reach out to us whenever you need us. We're here and we're going to get through this together. So all my best, and thanks again to Adam, Anna, Kate and Jack.
Thank you, Mark. Now, to start things off, here is a short video made by Park Circus last year as part of their For the Love of Cinema campaign. It's to remind us of the magic of the cinema experience. Enjoy. Fantastic stuff. Now, before we talk to our first guest, Adam Woodward, we're going to take a poll which will pop up on your screens. So we're interested to know whether you currently screen, rep, film. So I'll give you a second to answer that and I shall announce the results. So the question is, how often do you screen, rep, film in your cinema or festival? Often, sometimes, never, or rarely. Almost the name of a film. All right, so we have the first results in. About 50% say often or sometimes. Only 2% say never. That's encouraging stuff. Thank you all for taking part in that survey. Interesting stuff. Okay, so Adam, welcome. It's lovely to see you. We're really pleased to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, you know, I know you from way back, going to the big screen and seeing you at actual film screenings. I know we're both excited to get back. But first, before we talk about the big screen, tell us a little bit about yourself and the ethos behind Little White Lies.
Yeah, sure. So I am the digital editor at Little White Lies. And for anyone who doesn't know, we are a print magazine, a website, a YouTube channel, a podcast, and various other things as well. And I would say, really, since we were founded, which was kind of way back in 2005 now, our ethos has always been to champion independent voices within film. I think we maybe have a bit of a reputation for being a bit more niche or skewing a bit more that way, but we really cover all kinds of films, you know, across all of our platforms. And I think, as I say, we're just kind of really interested, whether it's new or old, in just looking at films from I guess through a slightly different lens to a lot of other mainstream outlets.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by a different lens? Can you give me an example, maybe?
Yeah, I think one example would just be to look at the kind of films we tend to cover on the magazine, and actually like the structure of the magazine as well. It's become slightly more templated over the years as we've kind of had to reallocate resources a little bit. But essentially, you know, we take an upcoming release, and we have done rep films on the cover as well, I should say. But generally, we take an upcoming release and kind of do you know, the whole issue is like a deep dive into that, and we explore various themes around it. So, you know, we're not just kind of doing your bog standard review of the film or doing like interviews with top billed cast and director and crew. You know, we're taking a much more I guess like granular look at the film and like the structure and the makeup of that. So I'd say that's a kind of like, you know, on a basic level, that's how I would say we approach film in our coverage.
Can you tell us a little bit more about when and how and why you cover rep film? You mentioned occasionally it's on the cover, but do you find that audiences are keen to hear about older films? And if so, how do you cover them?
Yeah, I think for the magazine, because it is a kind of consumer-facing title, and it was founded as a magazine predominantly covering new releases. We've generally kind of stuck to that over the years. As I say, we have done the occasional rep film on the cover, but by and large, we cover new releases mostly through the magazine. The website, which is sort of my domain, really, we've got a much broader scope and a much broader remit to cover older films, alongside our coverage of new films, of course. So I think one way we try and do that is to kind of connect newer releases with older films, which people may not be as familiar with. We do that a lot. If you look at our YouTube channel, some of the video essays we produce, we do a lot of that kind of there. And that could be something as simple as, you know, when a new film by a director is coming out, and maybe we'll look back at some of their previous work. So we did that recently around Nomadland and Chloe Zhao, although she's obviously only been making films for kind of 6 or 7 years. So has a kind of smaller or more recent back catalogue. You know, I think that's something which we found to be really of interest to our audience. And another way to look at that would be doing kind of more retrospective type pieces, I tend to call them. We have a section on the website where people can pitch ideas related to films that maybe will have a re-release upcoming or an anniversary. And they really are, I mean, they're among the most popular types of pieces we have on the website, just in terms of like, web traffic and response on social media. So I think that's something that's interesting and really encouraging from what I'm seeing.
That is interesting. Can you give me an example of some of the kind of reactions you've had to coverage of sort of classic films, particularly with anniversary? It's interesting that people are really engaging with it at that point.
Well, I think with anniversaries, often we're kind of tapping into, existing maybe fan bases or people's nostalgia as well. I mean, we often do kind of bigger ranking type pieces around films from, say, like the 80s or the 90s. But now we're kind of amazingly at this point where we're running retrospective pieces of films that are celebrating their 20th or 25th anniversaries that for me even feel quite new, quite recent. So I guess, as our audience has kind of followed us as an outlet, as a publication, and they've kind of grown up with us, and we hopefully have kind of helped them to discover more film. It's kind of fun. It's interesting to look back at older films from, I guess the era that we ourselves were kind of growing up and first going to the cinema and watching. But yeah, we go back even further than that. I mean, we will cover like Charlie Chaplin movies that are having their anniversaries, and we did a piece either early this year or the start of, or the end of last year around The Kid, and that for its 100th anniversary. And again, you might not think there was a massive, massive amount of young Charlie Chaplin fans out there, but I think the response to that piece was really encouraging to show that, yeah, we can put out pieces like that and not only just get people sort of liking and sharing, but actually commenting and saying like, oh, I love this scene or this film, or it's nice to see people talking about Charlie Chaplin. So yeah. That's
great, isn't it? Yeah, we've noticed this on Girls on Film recently because we're recommending a film a day by a female filmmaker and on socials, and people are really engaging with that, especially if it's something they've seen and loved and haven't seen for a while. That sense of rediscovery and like, oh my gosh, yes, that's such an incredible film. And it's really lovely to have that engagement with audiences. And what kind of age group is your audience generally? What's the demographic?
So we tend to kind of say it's like 16 to 35. Right. That's kind of more broadly, I mean, for the magazine, I think we kind of have is less clear on the exact demographics. Obviously, for the website, I'm kind of looking at the analytics quite like every day and kind of seeing who's visiting the website and seeing who's engaging with us on social media. And that's, I'd say, by and large, that is where our core audience is. So yeah, it does tend to kind of skew a bit younger. Although, I know people who've been subscribing and reading the magazine for years. And so obviously those people have kind of grown up with it a little bit.
Well, let's move on to the current times. What impacts do you feel that the COVID crisis will have had on the audience appetite for film? What kind of feedback have you had from people about that?
I mean, yeah, I guess it's affected film, however, whichever way you want to look at it on every end of the scale, right? I'm kind of sensing not only just through our audience and the relationship we have with them, but just anecdotally through people that we work with, people that I speak to, that there is a real, hunger to be back at festivals, to be back at smaller local cinemas. And I guess it's like two levels. There's one level where people, I think, just want to go back and have that communal experience and have that discovery, and also just wanting to support these places. And realizing, I guess, it's that thing of like, you don't know what you've got till it's gone, right? And how lucky you and I are certainly to go and see these films and attend these kind of festivals. But even people who I know who are more kind of tangentially involved and, maybe work at a local cinema or volunteer at a local festival, it's those people who I think, are going to be hopefully the people that really are saving these venues going forward. And in terms of the demand, I mean, it's kind of hard to say from my perspective as an editor. Like, I can talk about the types of content that seem to do well on the website, and I don't know how that translates necessarily or how that quantifies if you're looking at like ticket sales and bums on seats. But I would say I've kind of noticed like a real demand for maybe people voicing more of like a frustration about how limited the options for most of the kind of major streaming platforms are. So, and there's a lot of talk about kind of the lack of older films available on platforms like Netflix, for example. So that's kind of like where I see Little White Lies filling that gap for people a little bit, is being able to say, well, you know, here are other films that you may like, and they, you know, go back to, you know, Charlie Chaplin, and here are places you can watch them as well. So that's something I definitely noticed.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, often people are sort of saying, oh, is streaming replacing cinema? But this is obviously something streaming isn't catering for enough. So with that in mind, what role do you believe rep film will have in the reopening of cinemas?
I think just on a personal level, I think it's going to have a massive role. I mean, I've actually booked a ticket to see a Stanley Kubrick film at a rep cinema in London on Monday, the 17th of May, which is like the first day that they're reopening. Great. So I maybe seem very keen, but yeah, I've really been missing. I've been missing going to see kind of all sorts of films at the cinema. But I'd say maybe over the last year, I've watched more old films than I ever have done, and part of that is because, especially when the pandemic first hit and slates were kind of wiped clean for a lot of places and festivals were cancelled, it was suddenly like, oh, I don't have to, there aren't as many new movies for me to watch right now. So I'm gonna start going back through all the various lists I've made and feeding my own discovery, I guess. And I get the sense that there's a lot of people that have been doing something similar. And I guess this is where the people voicing their frustration about the lack of availability of certain titles on certain streaming platforms comes from. So, I mean, yeah, if that can translate to real world, actually people going to buy tickets for rep films in bricks and mortar cinemas, which I'm sure it can do, then I think there's going to be a massive appetite for it going forward.
Well, obviously, you and I are effectively press. How can we all unite with distribution and exhibition to inspire audiences back into the big screen habit?
I guess there's a duty of just making sure we, you know, are considering rep film in our coverage. Sometimes, you know, you may be working for an outlet or have an editor who isn't as interested in that, and that's fine. Obviously, everyone's got their own prerogative, but I think just on a personal level, even using your own platform, using your own social media channels to say, you know, here's a great festival that's coming up, and here's a way you can kind of get involved, or here's a way you can discover a great old film. I think it can be as simple as that.
Brilliant. Well, Adam, it's a pleasure speaking to you, and we will be chatting to you again in a little minute. But for now, stand down. And in a moment, I'm going to bring Jack and Kate of Park Circus into the conversation. They're going to be able to tell us a little bit more about how they can help plan sales and marketing as you approach your own reopening. But first, a short video. We mentioned how Park Circus can help bring classic films to life, and they often make fabulous new trailers to help inspire audiences to revisit films. We're now going to watch the most recent example of Fargo, which we were just talking about this very thing, believe it or not, celebrates its 25th anniversary this year. And that will be released by Park Circus in the UK on the 11th of June, following its very successful screenings in various international territories that have been open. More from that on Jack shortly. Let's have a watch.
You want your own wife kidnapped?
Yeah. We gotta talk. It's something hard, geez. It's terrible.
Here's the second one.
I want you to tell me what these fellas look like.
Well, the little guy, he was kind of funny looking.
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
More than most people, even.
So we got a trooper pull someone over? We got a shooting. These folks drive by. There's a high-speed pursuit.
Yeah?
Ends here, and then this execution type deal.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's going to be so great to see on the big screen again. Now, I'm delighted to bring Jack Bell, Director of Theatrical Sales, and Kate Timperley, Marketing Communications Director at Park Circus, into the conversation. Welcome to you both. Hello. Hello. So thanks to Adam, we've talked about the cultural and audience appetite for rep film. So we'd like to finish by explaining how Park Circus can help cinemas and festivals feed that appetite. Jack, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit more about how Park Circus are preparing for the reopening of cinemas? How are you supporting exhibitors who've screened rep film regularly? And how are you reaching out to those for whom rep film is very new?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot there, isn't there? And I guess as well with Park Circus, you know, we in some senses there's not really much for us to click into gear, because you know we're a distributor that doesn't necessarily rely on releases that, you know, follow the release calendar. We effectively have tens of thousands of titles that can be available at any given moment, albeit for sure within that we have titles that we proactively push thanks to new restorations that the studios do that we look after. Or where we represent their libraries, and Fargo is a really exciting example of that. Anyone that did watch our first webinar might feel a bit of a sense of deja vu, because we showed that trailer then as we had dated it for late January. So of course we were subject to the release calendar changes at that point, and obviously the COVID shutdowns. But the great news for UK cinemas, at least, and I know we do have some people watching from around the world today, is that, you know, the film has been performing really, really well in a lot of countries around the world. We were working with Golden Village Cinemas in Singapore, for example. We have licensed the film to Toho in Japan, who is a major studio exhibitor and distributor, who will be launching that as part of their 10 AM Film Festival, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is a really major focus of repertory film that happens every year across Japan, that they were thinking of actually stalling at one point and have now picked it back up again due to audience demand, and Fargo's going to be a main part of that, which is very exciting. So the film has definitely received a lot of interest, both from exhibition and other distributors, but also from audiences as well. So as you say, that will be available from the 11th of June, but it's effectively available now in many other territories around the world in the 4K DCP and with lots of great marketing assets as well. And, you know, it's really exciting that, you know, this last year hasn't necessarily stopped new DCPs becoming available. We have a new 4K restored version of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and indeed the wider Indiana Jones trilogy, that will be available for cinemas when they reopen, which is very exciting, including a 4DX version of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So we'll see how that one goes. But also a 4K DCP of Gladiator, which Ridley Scott supervised the restoration of. Similarly, a director supervised new DCP of Claudia Wilde's Girlfriends, which should be a really great one to bring back to cinemas. Some people might be aware that it was recently brought out on Criterion as a Blu-ray edition, but that is now in DCP form for cinemas, and we're looking at plans for that hopefully over the summer as well. But effectively, we are here to discuss programs of all shapes and sizes. I think Adam covered a lot of really good points there regarding looking at the new release calendar and titles, that including Nomadland. Obviously, that is a big part of why we've been looking at Fargo as well, albeit there's the anniversary in DCP, which ties in nicely with it. But we have been working with cinemas to book Chloe Zhao retrospectives, even though her film catalogue is that bit more concise, shall we say. But lots of anniversaries that people can look at, and we'll be sending out a lot of newsletters in the coming weeks to look at other ways that you can tie in with new titles like Sound of Metal, you know, maybe looking at titles like Whiplash, for example, Drummers in Film, All Night Long, a classic British jazz film, things like that we'll promote. And just to give ideas, and really a lot of the promotion that we do outside of the albeit actually quite rare releases that we put onto the release calendar, is present ideas that are very much just food for thought, and to encourage a sense of curation from cinemas and how repertory film can be a really solid part of that. Because I think one thing that we've learned over the last year is that we're looking for a variety of voices. And I think that there is a kind of demand and a need to, respect audiences' desire for a greater range of choice, which again, Adam referred to, which on the one hand, there's never been more choice, but equally there are so many different platforms that people can access. But cinemas are in a great position to try and bring that together that fits within what they do and who they are. And Park Circus is in a really great position, given the sheer size of catalogue we have, to help facilitate programs that will work really well in that sense and provide something that people can't get at home and hopefully are really excited about going back to.
There is a lot of excitement, because when you said Raiders, I went, ooh, and then I see some other people have said that in the chat box. So yeah, there's a lot of excitement about revisiting these things. Kate, can you tell us a little bit more about the marketing team at Park Circus and how they support exhibitors once they've licensed a film for you? What kind of services do you offer to make booking Rep Film a viable proposition at that point?
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Well, in our last couple of webinars, we've talked about the kind of sales element of it, but we've got a sort of small but mighty marketing team at Park Circus who, like all of our colleagues, are really passionate and knowledgeable about film and are just kind of itching to help you make it a viable proposition, really, to kind of book up and get involved with putting Rep Film and making it a really kind of key part of your program. So it's basically, even before you decide to book, we're here to help. If you check our website, we've got a lot of great features on there that really take a deep dive into our catalogue. So we've got a feature called Close Up. We have a feature called Guest Picks, where we get kind of friends from across the industry to pick their favourite films. So if you're just looking to browse and kind of understand the sort of breadth and depth, or kind of go down one of those kind of crazy rabbit holes and just be like, I never knew that film was inspired by that film, that's there to help as well. If you check out our socials, they give a lot of kind of great inspiration. We do a lot of kind of Born on This Day, lots of great kind of behind the scenes shots from films. So that will hopefully kind of get the juices flowing a little bit before you even book and visit Jack and his team. And then once you're booked in, you will be sort of sent back to us. And we're basically here to help. We do everything, we mentioned those kind of, Jack mentioned kind of Raiders and Fargo. So we do everything from kind of those big campaigns. We mobilize and create big campaigns to support those films. We have in-house creative director, we've got an in-house social media manager. So we often will create new posters or new trailers like the one that you've just seen, which will obviously be a big help for audiences. It helps to kind of reframe or make people say, oh my gosh, 25 years since Fargo, which is definitely what I said. So those new materials will obviously help to bring your audiences back in. Got social media, we run our own in-house PR activity as well, so that will also be helpful to you. We also are really passionate about audiences, as much as, not quite maybe as much as exhibitors are on a local level, but we're also here to help from that perspective. We're really proud of our ambassador network, which is a sort of 300 strong network of volunteers basically who help us spread the word on why classic film really should be seen back on the big screen. And they can work with exhibitors on a local level. We've got everything from kind of film professors who will come and do a great introduction and just kind of talk you through why, the things that you should look out for in this film, whatever. And that obviously is added value for exhibitors as well, to just, young film students who will gather together big gangs of folks to come and see Rep Film in your cinema once it's safe to do so, but hopefully we'll be back in that territory before too long. So we've got that kind of major marketing campaign element, but as Jack said, we're also about curation, and we have a ton of great stuff that we can do with kind of lesser known films as well. There's so many kind of hidden gems. We have access, so once you booked, you come to us and get assets for the film that you've booked, great, original images, perhaps posters, trailers, behind it, all of that kind of stuff. Just ask us. We're desperate to give you this stuff to support and promote your screenings. We will promote your screenings on our channels. Basically, we just want to help you fill cinemas, and that's how we do it. Mobilize our ambassador network, support you on a local and kind of granular level, and yeah, that's it. That's what we do, and we're really happy to help and very keen to help. Obviously, work very closely with Jack and his team. We also support our kind of home entertainment division as well, which will be a subject of a future webinar, that we don't just do the kind of big screen experience. We do have a smaller home entertainment division, and we work with those guys as well. So yeah, small but mighty team, here to help, and very passionate about audiences, basically.
Thank you, Kate. Jack, is there anything else you wanted to add to that about the process, or anything anyone should know?
Yeah, I think there's something that I've repeated in previous iterations of this webinar, is that really the power in that communication that we have with exhibition. We're obviously that one step further away from audiences, but really, I think the context of different programs people are putting together is just very, very interesting. And I think that could be interesting to Adam's previous points from an editorial perspective as well. What are people programming? Why are they programming it? And I think as well, there is a real value in spending time in looking back in film history generally, which can increase the level of diversity that we can have in programs that get put into theatres. And from our perspective, we're a distributor that is happy to receive one booking from a cinema where the film will be played only once, and it's part of a much larger program. We're not here to expect week runs of every film that gets booked, and we're very adaptable in that sense. And I think starting that conversation with us in a fresh slant is always a good approach, because that is something that we do pride ourselves on, is our adaptability. So definitely letting us know, what types of programs you want to do, and, actually planning quite far in advance, so that when the program does happen, you already know that rights are available, what materials are available, if you can show 35mm, indeed 70mm in some cases as well. And, kind of put that in motion. We had Jan de Vries on our first webinar from Kino in Rotterdam, who amazingly installed a 70mm projector last year. But I know, having worked from them before that cinema even opened, it's quite a new cinema in Rotterdam, that they spent a lot of time looking at the investment it would take in that and how they put it together. And we worked with them to tell them, well, these are the prints that we could actually make available to you that we don't have reflected on our website for various different reasons. But I guess that point is really just to say that the longer lead time you give yourself, the more detailed a program you can put together, basically, and a more hopefully kind of complex and interesting program. And I would say as well, one thing that we don't have on our website at the moment is whether films are available in 35mm. You can search by what's available in DCP. But one thing that we're looking at doing more and more of is working with the studios to tell them, this cinema or these cinemas have asked to show this title in DCP, but it's not yet available. And that is really, really useful and interesting to these studios, who have a very complex way of looking at preservation, restoration. Obviously, there's the interesting part now towards streaming platforms and how that is looking at new materials for their catalogue. But it is noted by us in the studios if a cinema gets in touch with us to say we would like to show this in DCP if it's currently not available. So feed all that back to us, and it definitely doesn't get forgotten. It gets picked up on. And okay, we're not going to turn around the DCP for you within a day to obviously make that happen, but it's part of an ongoing process where research is key and marketing is really key for it to properly work as well. So there's so much more to how you can use us as a distributor than coming in with your booking and your date. There's a much bigger process if you have the time, if you have the effort, if you have the priorities within your organization to make repertory part of your program. If you do make repertory part of your program, the time you spend on it, you will get that back. And I can assure people that definitely audiences will respond to that without it needing to be the main part of your program. Places like the Prince Charles Cinema are a bit of an anomaly in that respect, for sure. But you can add it in, but just give yourself the time to do it.
Well, talking of audiences, our audience here have been quite quiet. So do please ask some questions of our lovely panel, and Adam can jump back in if you want to ask him a question. Meantime, I actually asked Adam a question earlier, which I'd like to speak to you both about. The question about how can we all unite distribution, exhibition and press to inspire audiences back. Kate, do you want to take that one to start with?
Yeah, I've been pondering that since you asked Adam earlier, because I think it's really so important, isn't it? I think for me, from a marketing perspective, it's really about how, as distributors, we can work with exhibitors to add value to screenings, whether that's in a very direct fashion, you know, organising an introduction or some programme notes or some editorial. One of the great things about Park Circus, I call us kind of small but mighty, but that makes us very kind of flexible and adaptable as a whole organisation, but particularly as a marketing team. So we're very open to suggestion, and I would say, you know, we need to be even more open to suggestion over the kind of coming weeks and months, and I think that will help. We want to help you sort of take risks in the best possible sense. So, you know, if you have kind of thoughts or ideas, I think that's where we can be helpful in the way, not that other distributors can't, but I really feel that kind of behoves us to be responsible in that way. And yeah, you know, of course, you know, working closely with journalists like yourselves, I think distributors can be helpful there, and really dialing in and making sure that the rep film you're covering is linked up with screenings that are actually happening. So I think there's a lot of exciting things to be done there. Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. Jack, anything from you on that?
No, I think it maybe refers a little bit back to what I was saying before, and just really taking the time to kind of chat through what the plans are effectively. You know, a big part of really how we work is to facilitate, you know, really, you know, we're not a distributor that has a specific slate that we can make available. You know, it's very adaptable in that sense, and so I guess it's really just you know, speaking to us in advance. I think, you know, now is a good time to do it, fully recognizing the challenges that theatres have, where staff are potentially on furlough, or it's situations across the world, or just, you know, a lot of difficulty, of course, you know, and for us indeed to approach exhibitors too. So I think it's yes, you know, it's good to start planning early for these things. Albeit as well, there is the current release schedule that has not been easy to juggle and manage and keep feel it's too settled, I suppose. But, you know, there brings the opportunity as well. And I think that's been you know, there's been some hopefully positive disruption that, you know, I think really shouldn't end in that respect as well. So, and, you know, we're very keen to be part of that in some ways, and to help people think outside the box a little bit. Maybe not a direct answer to the question, but yeah.
Thank you. We've had a question or two. First of all, this is for Kate. Can you tell us more about the Park Circus Ambassador Network? Because that does sound intriguing, I agree.
Thanks. Yeah, it's my baby, if that's not a weird word. I'm incredibly passionate. That's what my background is around kind of bringing new audiences into film. So yeah, it's about 300 strong. It's based sort of substantially in the UK and the US, but we also have kind of sprinklings of ambassadors all over the world. They're just an awesome collection of people who just love film. They either know a great deal about film, they might be kind of film professors or something like that. If you check out that editorial that I mentioned on our website, it's lots of our ambassadors have helped out with that. And yeah, they're really here to help. You know, we have lots of people very local to specific cinemas. Some of the people listening may even have worked with ambassadors already. Lots of them write very well, so they're open to kind of writing blogs for websites, that kind of thing. And they can help very well sort of logistically as well. You know, we've had ambassadors volunteer with their local cinema. I've put them in touch with people and they come along and just kind of get a bit of experience. We also have a wonderful thing where it's sort of taken on a life of its own, and our ambassadors are also in touch with other ambassadors to kind of mentor each other, that kind of thing. So it's a really great thing to be a part of, and it's very flexible as well. There's not a sort of certain number of hours you have to do or anything like that. It's, you know, it's a relationship with us, and it's sort of what works for you, and it's a great chance to kind of get some experience and either work on a kind of very local level or a national level. And yeah, be in touch basically. And the details are on our website, but we love to hear from people. And we've got ambassadors. We just recruited our first ambassador in Uruguay actually, which is quite exciting. I have a little map of where I kind of drop the pin of people. But yeah, they're great. It's a great thing to be a part of. So be in touch if you feel like either you want to be an ambassador or you want the help of our ambassadors.
Yeah, and it does sound something interesting perhaps for Adam and I to tell our readers and listeners about as well, like the young ones, because you say if you're really engaged with film, it's a great way to sort of get on board, isn't it? It sounds like I'd have loved that when I was a student. That sounds really great. We've got a question for Jack. Do you just do indoor cinemas or do you do drive-ins and other spaces? Good question.
Yeah, hot topic obviously over the last year particularly, and we do work internationally, and if there are some places around the world where the drive-in setup, for example, or outdoor cinemas are that bit more established. The US is probably a good example of that, Australia as well with the summer open air season. So yes, effectively we can license drive-in screenings or outdoor screenings as well. Probably most people that are joining the webinar will be familiar with the theatrical, non-theatrical question in relation to that. And that is something that we do need to watch with those type of screenings, because the main licensing offer we have is for theatrical licensing, in-cinema licensing, or film festivals, for example. However, the main point is really around DCP format, digital cinema package. So DCP is the kind of established theatrical format. So if you're a venue that can play DCP format for your outdoor space, or as a drive-in operator now, we can definitely license those screenings because it is being played through a theatrical format. And that really has picked up over the last year, and we've been working with some really great organizations, including the Indie Cinema Group and their screenings through Netflix as well over the last year. They've been doing a really great job, and indeed, shout out to Indie Cinema Group, because I know that they are a great organization to be in touch with to look at establishing that type of off-site venue, perhaps if you're looking at options to do that while your cinemas are closed. Obviously, easier said than done in some senses, but you got to start somewhere with these things. Also Scottish based, I should add. But otherwise, we can also license outdoor drive-in screenings on other formats if DCP is not available, because that does indeed add extra cost to the feasibility of doing the screening. If you are a theatrical venue, so if you're looking to set something up, and you're just a cinema at this stage, I see in fact that Home Manchester just announced today that they've started some kind of open air venue that I've not read the full details about, but I think they'll maybe be doing theatre live and things like that, which sounds fantastic. So for example, if they were to do an open air cinema screening, then as a theatrical venue, we would be able to discuss that without it necessarily needing to be on DCP. That being said, there's extra kind of layers to that where different studios that we represent have slightly different policies, but in the main, those are the different ways that we can license those type of screenings, and they can perform fantastically well. They've been some of our best results over the last year is those drive-in screenings and open air screenings that have happened not just in the UK but further afield.
Brilliant, love it. I can't wait to get back to a drive-in or an open air cinema. It's so fantastic. Adam, something for you, but it's less of a question apparently, but quite an interesting point to make, says our questioner. We have an exhibitor who's very keen to support live musicians who play along to silent films. What help and support can we get to support them? An article in Little White Lies would be fantastic, they say. Putting you on the spot there.
That's an interesting one. I've sort of on the side over the years programmed a bit at some music festivals, and one of the most popular things we've ever done has been live scores with various bands and people. So I don't know how much scope there is for us to kind of cover that editorially beyond outside of kind of looking at whether it's a film festival or a music festival or some other kind of event. But yeah, we have and we would cover those kind of things. I think increasingly that stuff is relevant to our audience, and we have there's a massive interest in crossover interest between film and music especially. So
yeah, those sort of events you never forget, do you? I've been to a few of those. They can be absolutely incredible. So yeah, get in touch, fingers crossed. Thank you. Question for Jack here. If a physical festival has a film planned and booked from Park Circus, but then has to move online at the very last minute due to sudden restrictions, can you still provide the booked film for that format?
Yeah, well, firstly, my sympathies if that ever happens, because we've had to deal with a lot of cancelled screenings, obviously, around the world, which has sometimes had to happen at quite short notice, of course. The main answer would be no, unfortunately. Online screenings are not something that we can license for the vast majority of the titles that we represent due to studio policy effectively. And I think that's why we've probably seen quite a lot of independent distributors with new titles where they've been able to establish that form of distribution from the off, whereas obviously the titles that we represent already have a lot of deals, licensing deals in place where, you know, those films are available online elsewhere, that to all of a sudden do a theatrical variant of that is very challenging to do and actually just difficult. And also as well, there are different format materials that are required for online screenings as well that comes into the equation. So I think it's something that we've had a million conversations about over the last year, to be honest, and we really do our best to help as much as possible. But and it's something that I can assure everyone that we've very actively looked into as well. But it's very, very challenging, and effectively we've established that most of the titles that we represent, that's not a type of license that we can do. But certainly what I can say is that we're very accommodating with that, and are more than happy to reschedule the film for a later date when the cinema can open back up. And linked to that, I think this is a point I've maybe made in previous webinars as well, but looking at cost efficiencies as a theatre is in those cases where we have supplied DCP format, which I mentioned before, keep that DCP format on your, or that DCP on your server. And if you can't play that film without being sent a KDM, of course, that unlocks the content for you to play it. So it's no problem from our perspective for people to hold on to DCPs. And indeed, that is something that actually works quite well with people that program repertory quite regularly, is that they invest in big servers where they will they'll be able to keep content on that server so that they don't need to be resupplied at cost a film again. So a classic example might be, I'm definitely going to show It's a Wonderful Life every Christmas. Then you could keep that on your server, for example, and that makes it a little bit more cost efficient at booking stage, but is important for things like this when things get cancelled. But probably a good point to make.
That's really helpful, I'm sure. Thank you. So we're going to wrap up shortly, but I wanted to say, you know, is there anything else, Jack and or Kate, in terms of specifically how people book with Park Circus that you wanted to add?
I mean, I'll let Jack take the kind of the specifics of the booking process, but really just to say, you know, like check out our website, check out our socials. You know, you're all obviously on the webinar today, but we, you know, try and have a very kind of active role in the conversation around rep and classic film. And we just can't say enough how passionate we are about the big screen experience, really, and how much we've missed the cinema and how desperate we are to get back. And, you know, we want to help you. So that's the sort of process. Know that we're here to help. Like I said, I'll let Jack speak to the specifics, but know that you'll meet with kind of open arms if you are interested in screening rep film for the first or for the 101st time, basically.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's really just a lot of what we've said there, but certainly our website is the best resource to use, but also the team behind Park Circus. I think that is generally one of our strongest assets to Park Circus. That's probably that makes it almost the opposite point that I'm trying to make, calling us assets. But you know, the sales team, for example, you know, I'm coming up to my 10th year at Park Circus this year, and there's quite a few of the sales team that are in a similar position in terms of level of experience. And I think that repertory can be quite a hard thing to get your head around, you know, in terms of tracking down rights, and how you navigate that and actually make it a part of your program. You know, it can be quite challenging. That's obviously something that we're wanting to try and do through this webinar series, is to kind of remove those barriers that can be there, because obviously it's very easy just to follow the first run model and to kind of book the titles that have the big marketing materials that you can just use from the off there. But your program will become more interesting if you look at repertory, in my opinion. But I think through some of the people that we do highlight on our website, and, you know, looking at, you know, thinking about the sort of things that Adam's talking about as well, and, you know, even going back to what you were saying, Adam, about Charlie Chaplin, for example, you know, I think it's I think a lot of theatres can sometimes be surprised at the success that you know, older films can have, and I think silent films are really, you know, a fantastic example of that. You know, I'll never forget, there's been a couple of times that I've seen a Buster Keaton film played for kids. It's been, you know, a school screening effectively, and it's one of the best types of films to show to kids, for example. It just, they are glued to that screen because it's so visual. It's obviously there's a lot of silent era that's most famous for the kind of comic stars like Chaplin, but the Buster Keaton films, you know, his filmography is a huge part of our catalogue, and the Cohen Film Collection, who is one of the smaller studios that we represent, are a great one to take note of, and probably a lot of people will be aware of them, but they very actively restore their films, and they have a wonderful partnership with the Cineteca Bologna in Italy to restore the back catalogue of Buster Keaton titles. So beautiful 4K restorations, lots of his shorts as well, and quite short as well, so quite easy to fit into a program that can get filled up quite easily, especially if you've only got, say, 1 or 2 screens, for example. But it's so great for a wide range of audiences as well, because you're going back so far, and I think and they're very engaging types of films to look at. Even going back to the music example as well, you know, I think that is something that we do some licenses of. Coi e Scazzi is quite an interesting one, the Godfrey Reggio title, which you know, quite an intense film, but we do some music licensing for that film, where there are live score events that have played, I know, in some places across the UK, but in other territories as well. And I think it's always something that we can discuss too, and fits really well with silent films. I'm going off on a tangent. I have no idea where we started again here, but it's just basically all really kind of affirming the multitude of options you have when you consider repertory, just to be a part of your program at the end of the day.
And just to weigh in just quickly, we have a feature on our website called Spotlight On, where we interview some of the exhibitors that are doing great things, be they silent films or all sorts of things from all over the world. And if you're unsure about whether rep film, you know, can inspire audiences, then that's a great thing to check out, because the stories, you know, from the UK, everywhere, you know, people that have just started showing it, been showing it for years, there's some incredible stories on there. So do check out that feature, because it's really inspirational. I think that's a bit of an overused word, but I love it. I sometimes just read it back myself. So.
Okay, as you were saying, all Park Circus staff are so passionate about film and the big screen experience, and that's something we've definitely seen today, and all the lovely comments from everyone watching. Thank you. Obviously everyone's really keen to get back to the big screen experience, so I want to thank my panelists, Kate, Adam and Jack. Thank you very much, and to Mark for popping in earlier, and to you all for watching, and we will be back before too long. And best of luck to everybody with reopenings. Jack, did you have something to say? Yes.
I'm so sorry, Anna, for interrupting. I just saw that someone had mentioned about subtitling of films, and just to very quickly answer that. So one of the questions, again, people can have is, can I, you know, because obviously, you know, the vast majority of films that we represent are English language, but we are an international distributor. And sometimes it can be quite difficult to basically know how can you get a subtitled version of any given film. And normally we do actually have access to the subtitles for any film in almost all languages, and mainly because the files have been created for well, new streaming platforms now, probably is going to be happening even more, but also previous DVD or Blu-ray editions. So the problem often is not that there's a lack of subtitles or the translations, but just actually to do the technical work involved. And it's actually quite expensive to create a subtitled DCP to make available for whatever market you are in. That is increasingly not going to be as much of a problem for repertory, because more and more films have been released in DCP originally across the world, so that every language version is available. So if you're looking to program a film and you need subtitles for it, but it's been within the last well, now 15 years or so, then that should be available, because we have access to any DCP that's been created by the studios in the same way that we can access the marketing assets that Kate was talking about. But if you do want a subtitled DCP that is unavailable, then firstly, some venues might have the option to do soft subtitling, where they can actually project the subtitles separately, and we can provide the subtitle file for that. Not everyone can do that. Otherwise, it's a case of discussing the commercial model that would facilitate that, which is very, very challenging, but it's just a case of starting that conversation with us. And equally, if it's a film that you feel would be really interesting for you and a band of cinemas to come together that might want to show that film, then that will help make the case for us to be able to invest in creating that version. So it's unfortunately more complicated than we would ideally like it to be. Typically, digital distribution and the advent of that a long time ago now, in some senses, has not necessarily made certain things easier. But again, it's all part of just asking us that question and kind of taking things from there. So sorry, I just wanted to answer that question.
No, it was a great question and great answer. Really more helpful info. Anything else anyone would like to say before we head off? Well, then thank you all so